up Solomon. We're going to wrap it up by looking at a few areas in Song of Solomon or Song of Songs this morning, and then finish up with 1 Kings 11, a little bit of it. And then we'll look at the area of Proverbs, not today, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and then we'll be done with Solomon. We'll jump back into 1 Kings, where we'll take over from there after his life is over. And so that's where we'll be at. So go ahead and jump in. It's good to see everybody this morning on this first day of the week. Let's go ahead and get everybody started with our lessons, our questions, as we do every week. As you see, this is where we'll be looking at the Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 1 through 4, and chapter 6, verse 3, just a few areas. But I'm going to talk, most of the class is going to be on it, that we'll look at to basically bring some responses and explain some things that have been taught over the years, some things I don't agree with, and some other things that some try to teach. I'll just show you as we go through that, and you can come up with your own thought. But all right, so let's jump into this. Lesson 134, we'll go back to Jacob, Genesis 28. What did Esau do when he learned that his Canaanite wives were displeasing to his father Isaac?
He went and married. He went and married.
He went to Ishmael, as we understand, which would be dealing with Abraham all the way back, and went and married one of them. Exactly right. Took them anyways. I mean, he didn't agree with his parents, and then we see he was how he was going to be, and he was going to live like that the rest of his life. And we know exactly what happened. How much did Jacob vow to give to God? A tenth. He said, I'll give you a tenth of everything that I have. Exactly right. Next one. After the people of Egypt have given all their money and all their livestock in exchange for food, what did they then offer? Remember, this is the Egyptian people in Egypt with Joseph there, and because of the big famine that was going on. So anybody know what that was, what they did? What they said they would give?
What they would work for.
Exactly. It said they would give of themselves to work for them, and it says, and their land. So it said they give themselves and their land that they own to take care of all that. Exactly right. Which brings us to another one here. Back to Solomon now. What did Solomon do with the things his father David had dedicated to, basically dedicated to the Lord? What did he do with those? What was that?
Put them in the treasure of the house of the Lord.
Exactly. So basically put them in the house of the Lord. We know you had all those rooms on the sides. We had a lot of that there that would go in, that would be stored in there. And then, of course, inside the place, we also understand, as Solomon did the things his father David had dedicated, we saw to them. As we see now, Solomon, we also know, did a lot of other things. We know with silver and gold, made a lot of things with, and so on. So just remember that when we see there. All right, let's go on to the next one. These are long questions. When Solomon had the ark of God moved to God's new house, who carried the ark? The Levites, exactly right. Next one. In what part of God's house was the ark of God placed? In the holy place, exactly right. Holy holies in the holy place. What was contained inside the ark of God? There was only one thing left. What was in there? The Ten Commandments, the stone tablets, as we know. Next one. Why did the priest have to leave the house of the Lord after placing the ark of God inside the most holy place? What was that?
The cloud of the Lord.
Exactly, because the Lord had to come. We see it, he would do that, and they couldn't be a part of that, as we understand, and we saw it was filling with the cloud. Which brings us to the next one. What did Solomon do after the ark of God was placed in God's house? He prayed. Remember that little long prayer that he did? That we had that prayer. What position did Solomon take when he prayed to God? He kneeled and raised his hands up to, exactly right, raised his hands up to heaven, as we understand, towards the temple, we would see. Where did he pray that an Israelite's prayer be directed? Well, would be in heaven, he said, face this place. And he was talking about the temple. He was telling them to face the temple as they would do that, as they prayed that, knowing, of course, that would go to heaven and be as that part. Next question. Solomon did not have A, chariots, B, horses, C, camels, or D, ships. Which did he have? He had ships. Camels. He didn't have any camels. Exactly right. He didn't have any camels. Let's go to the next one. Solomon made slaves of the sons of Israel or the people of the land not totally conquered. People of the land not totally conquered. Remember, they were still, we know, among the Jews there. Exactly right. All right, let's go to the next question. The Queen of Sheba, so the Queen of Sheba did not give Solomon A, gold, B, spices, C, precious stones, or D, camels. They give him camels. That'd be right. And the next one. What kinds of gifts did other people bring Solomon when they came to hear his wisdom? A lot of different things. There was silver, gold, myrrh, spices, different, getting perfumed, ointments, all these different, I mean, it was just, basically, you might as well say every other thing you could think about pretty much, we see there as they were bringing, anything that was worth value, basically, is what we see with that, and that's real important to get, those things worth value. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into this. We're going to jump into the Song of Solomon as we see here, and as I stated, as we go through this, we're going to basically talk about a few areas of some misunderstandings of it, what's going on with it. So as we look at this here, it's basically a love between a man and a woman is what I'm saying. I'll show you why I say that. But we might ask, that question also, is what do you know about the Song of Songs? We think about that, and the reason that's so important is because, not many people really have studied the book. Not a lot of people have read it and gone through what is there as we see. Or some have read it, just very confused. Most people have never heard it in a class or in a public setting in the church. I would love to one day teach a class on the entire book. I think it's a great book to understand and what is found there. Adult class, of course. Some try to read the Song of Songs on their own and basically find it confusing. And they're basically like, who's talking? Who's talking in this moment? What's here? What are they talking about? Who are they talking to? Some translations, as in mine, the New King James Version, it depends on which Bible you have, I guess say, or King James will do it also. In bold, you may have before each section of certain verses, it may tell you who's actually talking, who that is. Some will put in he and she notations in the book to basically give you that idea. But remember, these aren't original. That's not original. That's something that man's added to the manuscripts, but it's an attempt to basically just clarify to the reader who seems to be speaking here. And we need to know that. It's important. Also, we need to realize, some say, well, how important is it to study this book? Well, once again, you think about every book in the Bible, we see, what does it tell us here? Tell me 2 Timothy 3:16, 17, if someone read that.
All scripture is given inspiration of God, and it is profitable for doctrine and for reproof, correction, and for instruction in righteousness, that a man of God may be complete and thoroughly equipped for every good work.
Thank you. So it makes it very clear that how many books of the Bible are important? All of them, every single one of them, exactly right. And that's what we see here as we look to this. This isn't a book to just not read or not to look to. So the Bible, the book itself begins by calling itself Song of Songs, and which is Solomon's basically song, Song of Songs. It's a Hebrew idiom to describe the song as the very best song of all songs. And that's how basically what Solomon's trying to say. He goes, out of all the songs that I've been a part of, basically this is the best song of all of them that you would see. And it's kind of like the thing about, we've been looking at tabernacle, we just did the temple. You have the holy place, and you have the most holy place. And we see that would be kind of the difference there. So this is what we're told about the song, it being one of the greatest. The most notable features is that the woman is a main character in this book, and she is also the main speaker throughout the book. I consider that just a book of Proverbs. Really, when you think about it, when you really look to it, I know the Proverbs, everybody can learn from it. But when you really get down to Proverbs, you read what Solomon writing to his sons. Proverbs is more being written to the men to think about, to look to apply to themselves. Where Song of Solomon is just written more to the women. And we see there, not that it can't apply to all of us, we need to get that. There's instructions to both. We see young men, young women, as we would find there. Both genders have much to learn from both these books of wisdom, and I pray that we do that, and that we continue to do so as we go through that. So let's go and begin with the method of interpretation of the Song of Solomon. I'm not going to have a whole lot of slides this morning, but as we look at this, this is the important part, the method of the interpretation. Unfortunately, it seems that there are hundreds of interpretations of the Song of Songs. There have been so many books actually even written about this. Some of them are very vulgar, very bad, shouldn't even be a part of anything involved with the Bible, and other ones just really don't even hit the mark properly at all, and so there's just so many thoughts to it. But perhaps one of the popular, interpretations has been an allegorical approach. And we go, allegorical, what actually is an allegory? It's a story, it's a poem, or a picture that basically uses symbolic characters you would think of, symbolic events, basically settings, represent, hidden messages or hidden things there within it. Deeper meanings, typically moral, political, or even, you'd say, abstract ideas that are out there with it. This view, of course, declares that the Song of Songs, what they believe when they look at this allegory, is not teaching about human love at all, but depicts either Christ and his love for the church, or God and his love for Israel. And what has happened, people have kind of gravitated to this interpretation because of the highly suggestive language of love and romance that is found in the book of Song of Solomon. But there are significant problems with an allegorical interpretation. I'll tell you right now, I don't believe the allegorical interpretation at all. I don't think it's right. I'll tell you, explain why I believe that. First, as we know, where does the song ever suggest that it's not to be read at its face value? And actually what is there? But should we understand as an allegory? Where does it tell us to do that? There is no indication in the text or clue or to the reader thinking that the song is speaking about anything other than the love that is between a man and a woman in these verses, in these chapters. It's totally unnatural, really, to read this book as God loving Israel or Christ loving the church. And why would I say that? Well, first of all, how could this book be about Christ and the church when it was written when? It was written in the days of Solomon. I mean, the church wasn't even, church was in God's mind, of course, but not in the people's mind, as we see. That would make no sense whatsoever. So no one reading would have a concept of the church in order to be able to read this book in that way at all during that time when it was written, all the way until the church was established. So third, the love that is described, in this book is explicit, without a doubt. It is. And it is not only unnatural but uncomfortable to use that kind of romantic language in referencing to Christ and his church. The church is the bride of Christ. Christ is the bridegroom. We know and understand, we understand that. But not in this setting, what you would find in the Song of Solomon. While the scripture paints God's love for Israel, without a doubt, Christ's love, of course, for the church as a marriage, these relationships are never described in any sexual terms whatsoever. And that's what you're going to find in the Song of Solomon. That's what you're going to see in these verses that are found here in this book. David, go ahead.
Galatians chapter 4.
I'm going to go there in a minute. I'll get there, then you can give me your point to say. So, I knew somebody was going to bring it up. Private preacher. All right, so, as we see it. So fourth, I'll get back to you, David. The allegorical approach leads to some extremely ridiculous interpretation. For example, look at this one right here, just one of the verses. A bundle of myrrh is my beloved to me that lies all night between my breasts. Now, the allegorical interpretation teaches that this is a reference to Christ between the two testaments, between the Old Testament and the New Testament. Rather than that, makes no sense at all. I mean, when you read this, and you read the context, one can see, that this is a complete reach to something that is unnatural explanation. When you find this here, finally, we must reject the allegorical approach because it is what we would find an improper way to study any book of the Scriptures, any book at all. And because here it is, we cannot begin with what we think the book says and then force the book to say that or to mean that. And people will do that in religion all the time. And it totally messes up what God wanted. So the only time, and this is get back to David, the only time we know something is an allegory is if the Scriptures actually tell us, and they actually tell us in it too. So as it actually tells us there, as we would see. So as we find this here, Galatians 4, where's it at, David?
Galatians 4, beginning at verse 22,
I got 24, but yeah, you go start at verse 22. Go ahead and you read through 24.
Okay. For it is written that Abraham had two sons, the one by a bondmaid, the other by a free woman. And he who was of the bondwoman was born after the flesh, but he of the free woman was by promise, which things are an allegory. For these are the two covenants, the one from the Mount Sinai, which genereth to bondage, which is Hagar.
Thank you. So really when we get here, this is the time when it actually tells us this is an allegory. It doesn't do that in Song of Songs at all. Song of Songs. David, you have a comment about it, or were you just...
I was gonna elaborate on what you said. There's a term, it's called eisegesis.
Right.
And that's when you want the Bible to say what you want, and you're reading into the text. And what we're supposed to do is exegesis, which means to draw out
Right.
of the text and just read it for what it says, not try to find hidden meanings or force it to say what we want it to say.
Exactly. And I appreciate that. That's so true. And see, that's what happens in the religious world, why religions get off and away from the Word of God, because they make the Bible say what it says, like the book of Revelation. Everybody wants to study the book of Revelation. And they're like, oh, it means this. It means, for years they were saying, the red all about China, you know, and it's like, you just have to keep changing things. All that in Revelation, except for that of Christ coming back, all took place during the 1st and 2nd century. So that's how we have to look at that. So I appreciate that without a doubt. You know, we must always let the book speak of itself, based on interpretation from what it says, and not impose our own interpretation over the text. Exactly what David was getting at there in that moment. You know, we cannot start with an interpretation like this book is about Christ and the church, and then force the text to match what we think. Further, the sexual language in Song of Songs in the book should not bother us just because it is in the Scriptures. Some will be like, I can't read any of that. Yes, you can. See, God is the creator, we know. I'm just saying we're all adults here. He's the creator of sex. We see and understand that He is the one who created these desires. In fact, 1 Corinthians 7, Paul was inspired by God and gave this very important advice to keep the desire and marriage pure that is found there. In fact, if someone would read this for us, if they want to, 1 Corinthians 7, 1 through 6, please.
Now, concerning the things of which you wrote to me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, because of sexual immorality, let each man have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband. Let the husband render to his wife the affection due her, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, the husband does. And likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, the wife does. Do not deprive one another except with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again, so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. But I say this as a concession, not as a command.
Thank you. So as we look at this, we understand it's pretty self-explanatory, 1 Corinthians 7, 1 through 6. And we see it talking about a husband and wife becoming one. And that's what we see here, the importance of that, of what's involved here. So to bring that out, I just wanted to show that it's nothing new to talk about, you know, sex in the Bible, to talk about a relationship, very important, between a husband and a wife, is what we see being described. Any other time, it talks about without a husband and wife, or, you know, that of adultery, or that of fornication. It talks about it as a sinful thing, a wrong thing. And so that's what we see. So it's very important to get that. So now let's jump into Song of Solomon for just a moment. Verses 1 through 4, like I said, in chapter 6, verse 3, I think it was the only ones we have that we'll study this morning is what they want us to do. So someone go and read this part here, Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verses 1 through 4, please.
Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. For your love is better than wine, because of the fragrance of your good ointments. Your name is an ointment poured forth. Therefore the virgins love you. Draw me away, we will run after you. The king has brought me into his chambers. We will be glad and rejoice in you. We will remember your love more than wine. Rightly do they love you.
Thank you. So now this is a woman speaking about a man, as we see here. And, you know, so the song begins with her desiring intimacy with the man. She desires to kiss him. Intimacy does not mean sex. We need to understand that. It's not what that word means there, because everybody jumps to it thinking, because the man and woman here at this point are not married yet. They're not married. There will be a marriage. They will get married as we see through this, and it will show that it shows us, well, it shows us that. If you go back and study it. We know that she desires to kiss him. His love is intoxicating to her. That's where she's getting at with the wine. His love is a joy and a great delight to her. Further, we know she's attracted to his character as well as his looks, is what we see in these verses. And he acts well, and he even smells good, is what she says here. Talking about his cologne. His cologne is his, says, and his name makes her happy, makes her excited. And we see this. And he's a person that other women also desire, that they want to be with him. They want him to make them his wife. And so we see it. So verse 4, as we think about that, just let me go back over here. Verse 4, you know, she expresses the desire to spend the intimate, alone time together. This is what they're looking for here in this moment. If you read the song, the whole thing, you're going to see throughout it that there's a fight. There's a fight between the world and people out there and time to spend together. And that's what this is going on here, about the time that needs to be spent together. They are continually looking for alone time, which is very, very important. Anybody that's a couple, anybody that's married knows this and understands, realizes, even when you're dating, you know, we see the alone times, we understand that, building up to that understanding of what would come to that marriage. They're continuing, the couple translations suggest that where it says the chamber, that's the bedroom. I don't believe that's the case, because that's never how it was portrayed in the Old Testament. It's always portrayed as the innermost part of the house, of the entire house. That's what the chamber was known. And remember, you remember the pictures that I showed, the video of more likely what Solomon's temple could have looked like, it would be the middle area, basically open. You know, people could come in and out, but still at the same time, don't think she's saying take them to the bedroom. That's not what's getting at here. There was a need for privacy, though, to a point for kissing, especially in that day. You know, romantic kissing was a no-no in public, you know, no POA, we would say, and understanding as we see that there. Of course, we know today, you know, it's still not the same. There's no stigma of it, of kissing someone in public and so on. Though it is not always done that way, as we understand, it would be a time of aloneness, you know, as we see together. But it's not hard to see that there was a need for privacy in this time and in this kissing that she's speaking about during this moment. The point is not that they are starting any kind of sexual relationship already, and I want you to get that, before marriage. The point is that they just want to spend some time together to the exclusion of others to get to know each other. And, you know, they want time alone, away from distractions. You know, we would say that's completely natural, isn't it? Is that natural? I mean, we all understand that. We see that moment even before you got married, as you were dating and so on. And, you know, dating your spouse. You start ignoring what happens. People start ignoring their friends. They kind of get put to the wayside. Spend more time with the person you're dating. And when they spend more time together, you spend time without distraction. You know, doing things together, not separate. And not saying that you don't both have your own hobbies, your own thoughts, your own ways. But you're trying to find this coming together of understanding of things you enjoy together and that you'll do together. And that's very important as you get into the marriage point of keeping that marriage going, as we would see. So that's all the verses 1 through 4 that they want us to discuss this morning, is just dealing with this area here, which now brings us to chapter 6. Chapter 6, verses 1 through 3, they are now married at this point in the song, very important to get and understand. So I'm going to go ahead and read for us verses 1 through 3, please.
Where has your beloved gone, our fairest among women? Where has your beloved turned aside, that we may seek him with you? My beloved has gone to his garden, to the beds of spices, to feed his flock in the gardens, and to gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He feeds his flock among the lilies.
Thank you. So chapter 6 begins with a question by the chorus. It's called the Daughters of Jerusalem. They're the ones asking the question in this song. So that's the chorus, as you would see here. They're basically asking, is everything okay? You know, is everything fine in your marriage? What's going on? Because you notice verse 1. Verse 1, you know, is they ask if she ever found her beloved. The reason, if you go back and read chapter 5, in chapter 5 they showed him leaving. He leaves. She had hurt him in some way, and there was a fracture in the relationship, and he left. He was upset about it and walked out wherever he went. We don't know all that. But chapter 6 basically says she went out looking for him. He didn't just come back alone. She went out looking for him, desiring to be with him, and praising him for who he is, basically apologizing, trying to make this right. And rather than focusing on what he is not, what she does here, notice in the verses, she focuses on what he is and who he is and how important it is. And we ask, did it work? Well, look back at verses 2 and 3. It tells us that it did work. It did exactly what was supposed to happen. She says that she has gone down to his garden. As we see here in chapter 4, we read of the garden as a sexual reference. It is, without a doubt. So the picture is that they have reconciled and that they are back in each other's arms. That's the whole understanding here of what we find here. She has called out to him, and she has basically responded to her. He did. And also, you know, he does not hold a grudge. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't hold a grudge. He doesn't get mad or upset. She finds him, and they resolve their problems. And that's how marriage is supposed to be, that when things happen like that. And that's what we find here. So the marriage appears at this moment to be back on track. Things are moving in the right direction here in chapter 6. And if you notice in chapter 6 that the marriage is in harmony again, because they are praising each other again. And we know this has to do, of course, we would understand God would be in the picture that we see here. But the main point is that they're looking to one another again, praising each other, telling what they love about each other, what they enjoy with each other, and what they enjoy about each other. And so that's why it's so important to see this. The Song of Songs, if read properly between a husband and wife, it's just remarkable how beautiful it is. And it's just like poetry would say. You know, poetry is just amazing when you really get into it and you really see what's there. And that's really what's happening in the song. So they want to be together. They're communicating what they want and what they need of each other. There is no greater thing needed in marriages today, and that is good communication. Good communication. Communication isn't just you can talk to each other. Communication, or the most important part of communication, what do you think it is?
Listening.
Listening is the most important part of communication. And taking it in and being a part of that. And understanding your spouse. And understanding the things of the past and how you bring to the future and where you are today. And you know how much better your marriage should be or where it is. And that's what we see in this. So there is a happy marriage relationship as each is responding to each other's desires. That's what we see here. And that's what allows that marriage to continue what we found. Dad, go ahead.
There's in the background of this, there's a commitment. You know, there is this desire to make things work and to realize when there's something going on to bring it out. Sometimes it takes some of us a very long time, and others it's very quick. But the point is that there is a commitment to work out. There is not a marriage on this earth that's perfect.
Oh, no.
The only perfect marriage is between us and God.
Right, that's right. And you know, and we see that and understand this, how important it is. You know, and that's what we see, you know, we make that choice, we make that decision to be a part of one another and to make that choice to do what needs to be done in the marriage. And you know the old saying, we all know it. I know I was told it before we got married, Melissa and I'm sure you've told the saying, you know, don't let the sun go down, you know, on your anger, basically, if you're upset or so on. And that's really what's happening in this moment that we see here, that they're not allowing that, they're doing what's right. So I would just suggest, if you get a chance, you know, read the Song of Solomon, Song of Songs, read it together, and you and your spouse, and just enjoy the areas of what God has written for us, and that we can study from it. All right, so let's jump in. Any questions or comments before we move on over to 1 Kings? I got to do 1 Kings chapter 11 also. Solomon's fall, a warning against compromise, as we would see here in this moment. Remember, as we think about this, 1 Kings 11 records the final years of Solomon's reign. That's what's happening here. We have watched a king blessed richly by the Lord, I mean, time and time and time again, and slowly turning his heart away from the Lord because of the wealth and the possessions that he accumulated. And, you know, he became so popular, so big. You know, he was the most popular king in all the world. And he wasn't only the most popular king, he was also what? We told us last week. The most richest, not king, but richest person in the entire world. So all this, what ended up happening, it went to his head. And, you know, God had, you know, many, many times, God came to him. We saw like Wednesday night, you know, it sounded more like, wow, what God had done for him. God did this, God did this, God did that. It's like, where do we see Solomon falling away? God was reminding him that whole time of what he had done to bring him back to where he needed to be. So as we think about this, you know, there was a foreshadowing, I guess we could say, chapter 9 and 10, of the disintegration of the kingdom during his reign, and now the fall of Solomon is basically complete. It's completed. All just waiting for him to die, really, in a sense. And you hate to say that because God knows his heart, knows that Solomon is not going to come back. We never read about that. And it's just a sad moment. So as we look at the fall of Solomon, we must also consider the factors that caused the fall and what we can learn for ourselves. So as we think about this, that we are not disqualified from running the race set before us for you and I, as we would see here. So the divided heart, that's what it all comes down to. Chapter 1, notice here, chapter 11, verses 1 through 8. It's all about a divided heart. It's a divided heart between a woman, well, basically of Solomon, because of what goes on with the woman, and that of the church, not the church of God, and everything kind of within what is Israel. So let's go ahead and read this, and we'll come back and talk a little about this, verses 1 through 8. If someone read it for us, please.
King Solomon loved many foreign women, as well as the daughters of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites, from the nations of whom the Lord had said to the children of Israel, you shall not intermarry with them, nor they with you. Surely they will turn away your hearts after their gods. Solomon clung to these in love, and he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart.
I'll go to the next one just a second. So as you think about this, I want you to notice something. Solomon didn't just go after women from different areas of the world. he also specifically went after the ones that God, not that he specifically went to, but he went after these women, the ones that God specifically said, do not touch any of these people in this, do not intermarry with any of them. And those are exactly the ones he chose that we see here. There were many others too also. David, go ahead.
Now Solomon, we could very, very, very well say he was rebellious. You know, when someone is rebellious, you know, oftentimes they know exactly what they're not supposed to do.
Right.
And they've been told not to do that, and it's more of a like, I'm gonna do the very opposite. You know, you see kids do that sometimes. You lay down the ground rules and say, you're not allowed to do this. And in spite of that, they'll do the very opposite, you know, and that's exactly what Solomon did. He knew what the scriptures said about this.
Exactly. I mean, you know, it's kind of like David said about child. When you think about child, you say, don't touch that. And what do? They're like, sometimes they won't do it, other times they're like, looking right at you. Or they wait till you turn around and they go, ah. And, you know, I mean, we see that.
We do the same thing as adults. I see a wet paint sign, follow the check.
Is it wet? Yeah. I mean, it's exactly right. I mean, no matter what age you are, we see this, but this is huge. So what we find here in verse 2 is the reason God said not to marry foreign women was because they will turn your heart after other gods. It wasn't that you're not going to be able to handle the Solomon. He said they're going to turn your heart, and then your heart's going to think it's okay. Once you turn the heart and you get the heart looking in that direction and that way, your heart actually tells you, because it's your mind, constantly, you're okay, it's all right. And you try to basically explain away why you think it's okay, even though God said it's wrong. David, go ahead.
Now, there's two verses that come to mind. Psalm 1, you know, shows a progression. You know, blessed
Yeah.
is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, stands in the way of sinners, or sits in the seat of the scornful. That's a progression.
Right.
You start listening to the advice of immoral people. As Solomon, he's listening to his wives, you know, these people who are not giving him good advice, instead of looking to God. And then you start standing in the way of sinners. You're participating now in those things, and then you sit in the seat of the scornful. Now you make fun of those people who do live right.
That's right.
And then another verse, 1 Corinthians 15:33, evil companionships corrupt good morals. There's a lot of different ways translations have that, but I think that's the American Standard rendering of it. And I know in the context of that is talking about resurrection, and you spend time with people who say there's not going to be a resurrection, and that's going to rub off on you, but there's obviously a principle involved that if you spend time with people who do not have your best interest at heart, you're going to be swayed by those people.
Yeah, and that's usually what happens. You know, God said that. God said this is what's going to happen. Any other comments? Any other hands? Doug, go ahead. I'll go to this Doug, then this Doug.
A lot of times when you're successful in life, as Solomon was, he was the richest man on the earth. You forget how you got it.
That's right. That's a great point.
You forget that God has blessed you, and you start feeling like, I did this, and so you lose focus on how you got there, and you become more important than anything around you. So you become, and there's a lot of people that do that. We've had preachers of the church that got all this worldly recognition for their writings and things, and
Yeah.
they left the church
Right.
and stuff. So it's easy to get caught up on yourself instead of how you got it.
Right. That's exactly. That's a great point. Great point. And it's so important to know that and realize that. Doug, go ahead.
Well, kind of what Doug is saying is what God gave Solomon the understanding for everything. Solomon used this wisely to start off with, but then he fell into the trap thinking that I can go with these women, I can do whatever I want to with them, and I'm not going to go worship their gods because that's what God said not to do. Because we go with the women because they would change, they would have him worshiping their God. Well, he just fell right into the trap because he went out and worshiped their God.
Exactly. I mean, and that's what we see with this. And as we look to that, David, go ahead.
Let me real quick. You know, there's several verses that start with the beginning phrase, be not deceived.
Right.
You know, I think of 1 Corinthians 6:9-11, be not deceived. You know, the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God, and names off those things because, you know, some people think, well, I can do this, it's not going to affect me.
Yeah.
It's not
about that for a moment. You know, Brent, this shows us that our joy in life is not finding another spouse. As we see here with Solomon. I mean, Solomon is just, not that he's divorced somebody, he's adding, just keeps adding and adding. Think about it. The problem is that, you know, someone married the wrong person, that they would be happier if they would maybe have an affair, or find somebody else, or do this over there. And that's what Solomon was looking at that wise. He was just moving on from one to the other. It all came down to, I'll say it again, his heart. It all came down to that problem right here. I mean, the heart that the Bible talks about in his mind, and we see that as we find that. Marshall, go ahead.
The thing that this makes me think about is even the wisest man at this time, surrounding himself with people who do not follow God, winds up falling.
Yeah.
We need to remember, because we're not even that wise. If we surround ourselves with people who are not with God, we can fall away.
Exactly. Yeah. And then exactly right. And that's what was happening here, as we see that he had forgotten about the people of God, even his own people of Israel. Think about that. All right, let's continue to read. Dad, you want to go continue to read?
For it was so when Solomon was old that his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not loyal to the Lord his God, as was the heart of his father David. For Solomon went after Ashereth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not fully follow the Lord, as did his father David.
Thank you. Right there.
Then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, on a hill that is east of Jerusalem, and for Moloch, the abomination of the people of Ammon. And he did likewise for all his foreign wives who burned incense and sacrificed to their gods.
Thank you. So here we go. You know, once again, the heart of Solomon was turned away from being completely, is what it tells us, completely devoted to the Lord. Notice, some of it, somewhere in his heart was something for God, but it wasn't the way it needed to be. And so his heart becomes divided. Verse 5 and 8, we just saw it becomes clear the problem is that Solomon wants to please his wife. Nothing wrong with pleasing our wife, you know, gentlemen, we understand that. But with what Solomon is doing here, he's got multiple wives, and he's pleasing them by putting God on the backside over here. We can't even do that in our relationships. We need to realize how important it is. This is why his heart turns from God and begins to build these altars for all these foreign gods, and he did for all the foreign wives. This is what's interesting, that last verse, verse 8. So when we think of it, we only think of usually two altars, you know, Molech and that Chemosh, and that's it. But notice what it says, verse 8, and he did what? Basically the same. He did likewise for all his foreign wives. Any foreign wife that basically wanted to burn incense or sacrifice to their gods, he built something for them. I want you to think about when you're standing up in Jerusalem looking out, what it looked like on these mountains, what you saw, what was there. It's just terrible. I mean, can you imagine Solomon's rationale? This is really, would make sense of rationale of somebody that's somewhat with God. You know, I'm not going to worship these gods at all, but my wives want to, so I'll go ahead and let me do it. You know, let them do it. I'll let them worship how they want, and I'll go ahead and build these things for them, but they're going to take part of it, not me. But that's how sin starts. That's what we see. That's how sin comes to us, as we find in this moment. Dad, go ahead.
Mars Hill.
Yes.
Many gods.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, I mean, to an unknown God. You know, all these different gods, and they're worshiping the unknown God because they want to make sure they got them all right. And as we see there. You know, over time, we know, as we see, basically, Solomon started compromising. That's exactly what he did. Solomon did not specifically come out. He never specifically came out and pronounced, basically, you know, rejected the Lord. He never said that at all. But his heart was not completely with the Lord, and it's how his compromise began. We think that there is no harm in making what seems, you know, to be a small compromise today. How often those decisions every day, those small ones, slowly build up to be big things. And we see and understand and actually pull our hearts from the devotion that is found there in the Lord. Let me jump ahead. I got 1 minute left. Let me see here real quick. What do I want to say here? First, I want to understand that Solomon's... as we understand, you know, when Solomon dies, 10 of the tribes will separate from Solomon's family. And so they're going to separate and become a nation under the rule of Jeroboam, is what we're going to see. Solomon's son will only rule over one tribe. It sounds like David, all again over Judah. That's it. And judgment comes when our hearts are turned to the Lord. And that's exactly what we see. You know, recall what the scripture said to Solomon earlier in his reign, 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 3. Let me go ahead and go there real quick. And so you can see it. And Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father's David, except he sacrificed and burned incense at high places. So he was walking, doing what he did. is what turned him away. So he lost his first love at a time, but God, just as the church in Ephesus was warned, remember, about doing so. So we see everything was after Solomon. God is still warning the church today, still warning you and I. In Revelation 2 verse 4 it says, nevertheless I have this against you, that you have left your first love. That's what he told the church there, as we understand, as we find there in Ephesus in Revelation 2, in this verse 4 right here. Is you left your first love. That's what Solomon did, brethren. He left that first love. And, as we look at this, we can't abandon our love to God. We have to continue what's there always. And we do it by thinking about this for just a moment. Where it says, now these things happen to them as an example, but they were written down for instruction on whom the end of the ages has come. Therefore, let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed, lest he fall. In other words, look back at the Old Testament. Look back what happened, how things happened between God and man and humans, and what took place. And make sure that you stand firm, that you stand right. And that's what we see basically at the end of Solomon in these verses. So any comments before we close? Anybody else? Dad, go ahead.
Very quickly, we could see a modern application. Man and woman, one's a member of the church, one's not. Maybe some denomination, may not even be religious. They get married. He wants to please her, let's say, and what happens? He may start going with her to a denomination, and to please her, he becomes a part of that and has left God.
Right.
Not intentionally, and I've seen it in my own preaching career. I've seen it over and over and over again. Things like that happen.
You're exactly right. That's the thing, is it's nothing new. It's nothing that will stop. It's going to continue. It's just not on my mind. All right. So we just know that and understand the importance. Jennifer, go ahead.
Partial disobedience is complete.
That's right.
That's exactly right. It's so true. You heard Jennifer. She said partial disobedience is complete disobedience. It really is. And we see that. All right. Anybody else? David, go ahead.
I was going to say that was what Saul, when King Saul, when he tried to rationalize and say, well, I did this, but he spared the best in King Agag. And, God told him,
Yep.
to obey is better than sacrifice.
Right. That's it.
That's his thought. Well, I did part of it, but like she said, partial obedience is disobedience.
It is. It is. That's when we have to really think about that and understand. Some people say, oh, it's just a small little lie. Still a lie. And, whatever it is, as we've seen this life. All right, we're going to go ahead and end there. Appreciate your time and comments. Thank you.